Good morning, everyone. It's my privilege to be sitting with Mitzi Montague-Bauer. And Mitzi has a very compelling story to tell about her son, whose name is Journey, and his awakening process, and also his interaction with conventional psychiatry, psychology, and where she is now with the most amazing work that she's doing in her organization, Journey's Dream. So, Mitzi, thank you so much for joining me and being willing to answer some questions,
Ah,
reveal more
my,
about your story as a mother of Journey.
my pleasure.
Thank you. So,
Happy to. Yep.
great. So, to begin with, would you just give us a sketch of something about Journey, like when he was born, and so we place him in time, and
Sure, sure.
around the ages that you felt like, oh, there's something unusual going on here. And maybe you
Yep.
didn't have a vocabulary, to really think
I
about
didn't.
it at that particular time. But if you would just tell us a little bit from, your point of view as a mom.
Yes, of course. Uh, well, I started feeling Journey months before I conceived him, but that might be a completely another story. So he was born on my 27th birthday, which was March 20th, 1987, and he was born at home. It was a very precipitous labor, so it's a good thing that he was born at home. The midwives barely made it. Um, and I have a daughter who was 3 years older at the time, and when I took her to when she was born and I held her to me, the thought I had was, oh, mine. She's my baby, mine. This real possessive feeling. And when I took Journey to me, I was expecting that same possessive feeling, but there was a part of me that knew he didn't belong, like he belonged to the world in a way. And in the flash of a moment, I also knew that he would leave before me, even though as a brand new mother, I could, all those possessive hormones and that love that just is flooding your being. In my mind, I made that make sense of how I made that make sense was just he was a boy and he would marry, someone. Men grow up and leave their mothers, right? That's how I made that make sense in my mind, that he would leave me, that he would marry someone else, or maybe move to another continent or something. There was no part of me that grokked that he might leave the planet. Uh, and so then he just grew up to be witty and funny and inquisitive and brilliant. And just, I homeschooled my kids, and back when it wasn't popular to do that. One particular, and people kind of always sense Journey as this, I don't know, I call him porous. He kind of just understood things that maybe he shouldn't have, like just really perceptive. Knew my emotional landscape better than I knew myself, like truthfully. And he just perceived things differently, but it wasn't weird. It was just about this Journey. He's brilliant and quirky and whatever. This is his personality, right? Um, when he was 3 years old, he came running out of his bedroom. He was playing with his blocks, and he came running out and he's like, Jesus came to play blocks with me. And at the time, I had a contentious relationship with Jesus, truthfully. We in our home we spoke of God, and we loved God or creator or universe. Jesus and I hadn't quite worked it out yet. And so that wasn't a word that he heard. So it kind of blew me away a little bit, like, well, what do you mean? And I was speechless, but Brea, who was 6 at the time, she's like, oh, Journey, what did Jesus look like? And his 3-year-old little baby voice, oh, he was a very sparkly body. And then finally I said, well, did Jesus say something? What did he say to you? And Journey said, oh, he said I would have a sparkly body like his one day.
Wow.
And that was as a 3-year-old. Um, I put that aside, and then I would say when he was 9, maybe, just in conversation, he told me he wasn't going to get old. And I just, again, this is how we filter it through our own content, right? I'm like, for you, Journey. You don't have to get old. Aging's a concept. Like that's just a concept on the planet. The cells can regenerate. You don't have to get old. Never once in my mind was I thinking anything other than good for you. Mix it up. You don't have to get old. Um, so those little seeds were planted along the way. Meanwhile, Journey was a study of contradiction. He played electric guitar and grew his hair long and rode the skateboard down the sidewalk, but also, was in the chess club and, was in the honor whatever AP classes. And high school, we homeschooled him until high school, and then he went to public school in high school, and then got a scholarship and went to University of Michigan. And at that point, I thought, we've launched the kids. He's my youngest, and it was just like this relief of like, okay, now we get to step back and watch our kids become adults. And somewhere in his junior year, he got beat up. He got attacked coming home from a college party. He was by himself. 6 or 7 men and we heard on the news later, like, hey, college kids, we lived in Lansing, so East Lansing, and that there were gangs going around beating kids up. And so he was by himself and telling kids to travel in, pairs or groups or whatever. Well, I didn't know that this had happened until a few weeks later. My mom and I went down to visit him, and he was, yellow bruises and cuts and things. Oh, he kind of minimized it. But after that, we began to see him behaving differently, and experimenting and fasting and posturing. And he thought his colon was broken, specific part of him. And it became, and at first we just thought, oh, this is, Journey. He's like, if you hold your hands like this while you're swallowing your food will digest differently. And we humored him at first, but then it became more and more concerning.
And would you say, clarify, Mitzi, what you meant by experimenting? Was that with
Just like he was, well, he came home for one break and just said, can I borrow the juicer? And we're like, sure. We was glad he valued good nutrition. And then he was just living on juice for a long time. And then he told me later, like, I didn't know this at the time, but he would like swallow supplements while he was doing something with his throat, or he was contracting muscles to make certain things happen. All the somatic things that he was experimenting with his body in particular ways.
Okay. So you were not indicating then that he was taking plant medicines or psychedelics or
no. Although later when he came home, he did, he had smoked weed, I think, but nothing that had gotten in the way. He still, even though he was having trouble navigating his mind, he still graduated with, 3.8 or something. So, but he did tell me at one point when he got home that he had done ecstasy once and he wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
Now, the sense I got from Journey, because he was always so open, like very just open is the best way I can describe it. I think when he did do that drug, that ecstasy drug, as he said, it wasn't something he would recommend. I think it just like all the filters opened even more and they didn't close. It was like he was out there. And he would tell me about all these different dimensions that existed, and all these dimensions had different laws of physics, and one of them, the laws of physics was just mathematics, and these different dimensions that exist, in our reality, and the third dimension that we live on is the densest, and not much to offer here, and all these other interesting things were going on. And it felt to me like he was getting lost. Like, I wish, I get ahead of myself a little bit, but toward the end of his senior year, he was walking around with his eyes closed, and I don't know, just thought that whatever. He was just walking around with his eyes closed and maybe behaving strangely. Anyway, he was taken to the University of Michigan Behavioral Center, against his wishes, and we didn't even know it at the time. And he was medicated, given the court. He
Oh,
was able to defend himself on the little TV with the judge, who, of course, always, sides with the psychiatrist. And so by the time we even knew he was in the hospital, he had already been, heavily medicated. And that was his first of 9 hospitalizations in 4 years.
wow. And so he was a senior at college at that particular time. And
Yeah.
when they took him in, was he doing anything that was of danger to anyone else
No.
or
No,
hurt?
he was a happy, crazy person. I mean, if mad or whatever we call it now, he called it like I was happy. He was just like, no, he wasn't harming himself or others, but he was looking strange. His behaviors were peculiar. Um, so no, and he read, he knew enough to read those, that pamphlet and say, I'm not a danger to myself or others, so I'm refusing the medication. Well, that doesn't work in Michigan, or maybe anywhere, I don't know. Um, so then we were invited to come in to the hospital to meet with, the team. And U of M was supposed to be, cutting edge and whatever. Well, we were sitting across from this, doctor and his students and the techs and the social worker and whatever, my husband and I. And Journey knocked on the door and asked if he could be a part of the meeting. And he was told no. He was told no, that he could not. And in that moment, his right to self-govern was usurped from him. There wasn't a moment after that he was ever heard from other people outside of our family with respect. Yeah. So,
I'm
yeah.
so
So
sorry.
there were 9 hospitalizations. All the while, he would come in and out of, I don't know, I guess what I would call. Oh, he left that hospitalization, promptly came off the medicine. Cold turkey. This is crap. I'm not taking it. And then, of course, we know what that does to the brain. And so then he was back in the hospital. And then they're like, well, you're non-compliant. Then they give him the injection, lasts in your bloodstream for a month. And then his body, convulsed. And so then he was back in again. Like, just, it was horrible. It
And
was horrible.
so, Missy, for people who don't know, haven't studied this as much as you and I, what you're talking about is really withdrawal that can really complicate the brain in terms of confuse the brain with what's going on. So
Yes.
anytime we start a medication or we end a medication abruptly, it can be extremely difficult for the brain in terms of managing normal reality.
Yes.
So that's what was
Yes.
going on with him, it sounds like.
Yes. Yes. Though much of his symptoms seem to be somatic and less mental, so and honestly, for a large part of his, for the year after that, he was in had 3 hospitalizations pretty close in succession. And then he came home to live with us, and we didn't enforce the medication,
Mhm.
and he didn't take it. They said come back every month and give it to him, and we didn't make him do that. I never believed that was the answer. I know that medication saves lives. I know there's a place for it, but they were telling him, this is the rest of your life. The best we can hope for is managing symptoms with medication, and so
Can you tell us, Mitzi, if you wouldn't mind, what the diagnosis was for Journey?
nobody had one. Um, the They suspected schizophrenia at the first hospital because he was behaving oddly. And but they called it atypical schizophrenia. Then at one hospitalization, he was taking I apologize, I don't know the name of it. Most people who are therapists would. It's a several hundred true or questionnaire that they give people, and this was maybe his 5th hospitalization. And that doctor was actually willing to speak with us. None of the other doctors would talk to us because he was an adult. That doctor was willing to speak with us, and he said he was taking this exam, and several hundred questions, where you answer A, B, C, D, or E, or whatever. Took him a few hours to do that. And he's like, he didn't have schizophrenia. That's just definitely not a diagnosis for him. And so he's like, maybe bipolar. I don't know. Maybe nobody would agree on a thing, right?
Interesting.
Because he didn't present the same way anytime that he came. But some of the times, even though it appeared odd, like he was talking about he was making more sense than most people do. But then, an hour or so later, he would flip into, talking about something like it was like, what? I couldn't make sense of it. But he was going back and forth. But I never ever got the sense that he was unmoored. Like if we have filters, these reduction valves or whatever to keep the wide consciousness from flowing into our head. We have all these reduction valves, and it just felt like his just flew open. And so he had all this input all the time going on. And sometimes he could navigate it and make it make sense, and sometimes he couldn't. And I just wish that any one of those doctors and I'll just say, every one of them we met, I think were good people. I don't feel like any of them, I think they all wanted to help, but they're just working in a broken system. That all they know is medication. And so, and I would ask for something else. What about this? Or what if they're doing this in Sweden? Or heavy metal toxicity? Or can we test for this? Or what about this brain, maybe brain injury when he was beat up? I was just like looking, I believe the pathology they were giving me.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't my truth at all. But yeah, I lost my train of thought.
So, Mitzi, can I ask in this moment,
Please.
now that you know something about what we call spiritual emergency, do you feel that at the point that you're describing your son's journey, that possibly he was just tremendously psychically open and had absolutely no
Way to navigate it.
no
Yeah.
training to harness his mind, and so he could create filters. There was no one available who could do that, and that's no
No.
fault of yours or your husband's or your family at all. It's a very, very sophisticated kind of training that is not very excuse me, not very available in the United States. I think it
I
is.
was looking.
Yeah, I
I
know
was looking. Yeah.
available in Portuguese in Brazil, but it's definitely not something that's internationally known. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to insert that because it sounds like he was not only brilliant intellectually, but he was also, as you described, maybe brought on by his one experience with MDMA or ecstasy, that he was just tremendously open to all kinds of things and was not able to harness that as a gift for himself as well as others. Oh, your sound is off, Mitzi. I can't hear you.
I didn't change anything.
Now it's on. Okay.
Oh, it says my internet's unstable.
Oh,
Um, that's okay. That's exactly what I think, Emma. And I feel like if any one physician would have said to him, hey, dude, we get that you're having these experiences, but we're not. And you live in a body and this dimension. So let's figure out how you can navigate that and navigate being here. If someone would have said that to him, I think he would have had a great deal of respect. But what he was told was that there was a hardwire problem in his brain and that he couldn't trust it, and he's used to being the smartest person in the room. From the time he was a little kid. And so he didn't know who to trust anymore. And then he, 4 years of this on again, off again. He did some writing during that time that he was home with us. He felt like he was out of the race. He would just had all these dreams for his life, and they were not happening. In and out of the hospital. At one point, he had something called somatic delusion disorder. He felt like his body was breaking down, and there was no medical basis for that. Yeah. So
Would you like to say
sadly,
something about you and your husband as the parent of Journey at that time? Must have been extremely challenging, and I'm sorry if
oh my, it was really hard. Yeah, it just didn't fit for me. Like meant the picture, the thing they were telling me didn't fit. Like, what do you mean? This was a child who was conceived in love and born at home and breastfed and co-slept and cherished and nourished and given organic food before it was a popular thing to do, and no cavities, no heavy metals. I was just like, wait a minute, all these things that I was told could trigger psychosis or schizophrenia or whatever, you know, I they didn't it didn't make sense. But what I was told from people I didn't even know from the time I was pregnant with him was like that he was a unique being,
oh, mm,
and that someone told me once that she looked at Journey and she's like, I just get the sense like with him and his body that it's like us trying to wear shoes that are two sizes too small. Like like that's just how he's trying to navigate this body that is just she's like he's just doesn't quite fit. Um Lots of things along the way that indicate, that would indicate that Journey just a lot of people wondered, oh my gosh, what is he going to become? Because what a unique kid, he's smart and, he would compare the molecules in our body to the universe and all the orbiting things. I mean, he just all this, as a little kid, just always, always rethinking the norm.
mm.
So I never, I just never believed that he wouldn't get through. I always, and one person told me that this is part of his mastery. Like, oh, this is part of his mastery. He's going to figure this out and help people. And, I just kept holding on to that. Um,
So
of the 9 hospital,
he
pardon
wasn't
me.
he wasn't hostile then or highly irritable with
No,
you?
he got irritable from, he was irritable from time to time, mostly because he just felt like he was failure, right? Like just, and here, one thing, this is an interesting thing that happened to me. Um, I worked at a birth center and I'm a doula. I would be on call and go to births and what have you, but he wouldn't leave his house. He was in his bedroom pretty much 24/7. And so when I was home, I was in there with him. We would read, or he would read to me what he wrote in his blog, or we would, just visit. So and at that time, he believed he was dying of something in his colon. He would role play with me and he'd like, Mom, I'm not always going to be here. You need to understand, I'm not always going to be here.
Oh,
And I'm thinking, we need a really good, he's like, I don't need a shrink. I need a surgeon to fix this in my body, whatever. So, but he's telling me I'm not going to be here. And I just, and he would also say, you need to go do something with your friends. You need to go out with dad. Like you're spending too much time with me. You're spending all your time here and it's wearing you out. Well, one day in June, I came home from work and said hi to it, came and knocked on his door and no answer. So I'm like, he's sleeping or watching, doing something. Didn't think anything of it. But the next day, I said something to him and he just looked right through me like
mm.
I wasn't there. And I stomped and threw a little fit, like, what the hell's wrong with you? What did I do? Next day, knocked on his door, zero, nothing, ignored me. He would talk to his dad. Everything's fine. Nothing. Weeks of this went on. Finally, I'm just like, screw you. I went to my yoga class. I went out with my friends. I went for walks. I went bike riding. I went out with Rex, blah, blah, blah. Exactly 3 months later in September, I came home from a birth. Journey was in the kitchen. Hey, hi, Mom. How's it going? And I threw the same fit. I'm like, what the hell? You ignore me for 3 months and now you think you can just speak to me? What the hell? Right? And he's like, remember last spring when I told you you were getting worn out from spending too much time with me? I'm like, yeah, what does that have to do with anything? And he's like, well, at work. And so Even though it looked like he was being a hostile ass, it was actually a conscious gift to
Yes.
me.
Yes.
So he was just, oh, you asked me about us. So you can just imagine, I'm every waking hour, I'm looking for a solution, looking for somebody to help him and not having a lot of luck with that. And at one point, he thought his soul was trapped in photographs and he made confetti of all my family pictures. Gave away all his things, to homeless people or people that he felt was, would take food out of our house and give it to people. And I come home, I'm like, where's this food that whatever, the roast or what, how I cooked it and took it, down to the VA or what, just gave his coats away. I don't know, gave everything away really at some point. Um, didn't want possessions. And then finally, at one point, he was hospitalized again. There were only 2 times of the 9 times that that it was voluntary, that he took himself. And the last hospitalization, he called and asked for help. And it was around Christmas time. And he was of 2012. And he was hospitalized for several weeks, and then he was discharged to a step-down unit called Bridges, which is in Lansing. Basically, they have the freedom, 12-hour days. They can go be wherever they want to be, but they have to be there in the morning to take their meds. They have to be back at bedtime to take their meds, and they sleep there. So it's kind of for people who have been non-compliant, basically, to make sure that they're taking their medication. And so he was there for a couple of weeks, and my husband saw him one Saturday. Journey called and said, "Hey, Dad, will you take me to the mall?" And so they went, and he bought a nose ring, got some piercing or something, and they spent time together. Um, he made an appointment to go get his haircut on Wednesday. He had a new apartment coming up. This was on a Saturday. Sunday morning, my husband got up and went to church. I stayed home to write, and while I was writing, I stood up to stretch and looked out in the driveway, and there was a cop cruiser out there. And a priest and 2 cops came up my walk. It was never a good sign. And they told me that Journey had stepped off a building in East Lansing and had died.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. At the time, he was on 5 psychiatric medications that he had been put on and some Benadryl. And we found out later that he had been in communication with a friend of ours who's a physicist, and he'd been talking to him about levitating. And there was no note, or he went and got some groceries that morning, and then he went up to this building and stepped off. So
Mm.
it was, yeah, it
I'm
was a great shock to me, to all of us.
Thank you for going through the story, and I imagine it's still very difficult to talk about and revisit. Thank you, Mitzi.
Yeah, yes, of course. I can say that um, for other parents, perhaps, or other people, that Journey always knew when I had an agenda. If I came to him with an agenda, he knew it. If I came to him with just an open, continence of just, hey, what's going on? How can I serve you? Or is there anything you need from me? Or whatever, openly, then he was available. But if I came covertly trying to get him to take this supplement or do this thing or whatever, it was like, um, yeah. And so much of the time I was coming from fear. I was so afraid. And I think maybe on a soul level, I knew he was leaving.
Uh,
Like, I knew he was leaving in the moment he was born, but that had, kind of filtered to the back of my awareness. He told me once he wasn't going to get old, but none of that was in my conscious awareness at the time. I just thought he was going to get through this. And, we needed to find him get the right help or whatever, and he would get through it. But perhaps on some soul level between he and I, we had some soul contract or something. And maybe I knew that. But the point is, I was just coming from fear. And when we're fearful, our intelligence is compromised.
Yeah.
You're not coming from the place of clarity anymore. You can't be, because you've got a different filter running the show. And so I wish I would have done more things to take care of myself. Like that few months that Journey gave me, like of ignoring me, so I would just go do things. Like I wasn't balanced in my caretaking.
Mm.
I just feel like I had one role, and that was to figure out who could help him. And I wasn't giving up on it.
Mm.
Um, so finally, toward the end of his life, I realized that I'd maybe put the right thing in the search engine, right? Or maybe found this idea of a spiritual emergence, or orthomolecular medicine that could actually the body recognizes, or found put the right things in the search engine, and felt like I'd met maybe some people who could help him. But at that point in his life, he was just like, he didn't want anything to do with any of it. And so he was going to figure it out himself.
Mm.
So after he died, I had this pile of resources next to my computer, and wondered, like, well, what would have happened if I had had this in the beginning when he was asking for help, right? Um, so that was the inspiration to start Journey's Dream, our nonprofit, which is a nonprofit organization designed to like highlight things that are actually working. Everybody hears about talk therapy and medication.
Yeah.
That's everybody knows about that. But not a lot of people know about spiritual emergence, or um, heavy metal toxicity, or copper overload, or any of the number of things that could be instigating instability, right? So our nonprofit is we have a weekly podcast where we interview people who've gotten well and people who have solutions, innovative solutions that actually work. And my inspiration the whole time was not only to highlight the solutions, but to provide access to them, to be an endowment program, because most of the people who need these solutions, they're living on their friend's couch or in their parents' basements, or they don't have, and insurance, let's just be real, is interested in putting out fires, not preventing them. And so even if you have excellent insurance, they're not paying for a lot of these things that are actually working because they don't.
So
So,
could you, excuse me, could you describe a little bit how your endowment fund works? I didn't myself know.
well, we haven't. Well, because that was my inspiration, but it hasn't actually been very successful as an endowment program. We do have a successful podcast. We've developed some great programs, but what I'm finding is the people who have a lot of money to donate are generally connected to the pharmaceutical industry, and so they're funded by those organizations, and they want you marching to that drum. And so, since we're not opposed to medication. I mean, clearly there's a place for it. But we also really, our mission is to support people getting well.
Yes.
And so there's some things in the making. Like now we've been a nonprofit now for 8 years. And so we've done a lot of good things, and now there's something in the making where it looks like there could be a large amount of funding, in which case it will be amazing to be able to support people and having the care that they're looking for,
Yes.
or to help them find what they're looking for. Even some people might not even know what they're looking for, right? They just know what they're doing isn't working.
And so, if someone wants to uh, um, take advantage of the resources that you're providing now and could be providing in the future, how would you like people to contact you at Journey's Dream?
Well, our website is journeysdream.org. And listen to the podcast is one way that people can go and search through practitioners who have helped people. We have four paths. We've discovered that to get well, there's four avenues. Like, we're not bold enough to say we know a person's path to wellness, but we know that there's four areas that have to be discovered. If you know, and one of them is the path within, which would be the spiritual path. We
Yes.
have to get in touch with that element. So the path within, healing, medicine, and that medicine is a little bit tricky, but herbs or whatever it is, healing modalities, family,
Mm.
and community, and so you could look at those if you're interested in one of those. You could look at those, and then the podcasts have been placed in the appropriate access point. But then all of the podcasts are available if you know what you're looking for. There's a search engine. You can put the word or words or doctor or whatever in there, and podcasts will show up. And they're well produced shows. So those are weekly. Rex and Mark and Paul developed a program called the Optimal Being Program, which is also designed to help a person do the inner work. Yeah, so they could go to journeysdream.org and stay connected. You can reach any one of the founders through there. My email address is Mitzi, Mitzi, at journeysdream. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
wrote a book. I wrote a book about my life and Journey's life, which touches a lot of more on the spiritual elements that I didn't talk about here, but many of the things that made Journey unique as he was growing up are addressed in the book. Our experience, our spiritual landscape as a family. It wasn't traditional, nor was Journey traditional at all. So I gotta go into more of that in my book, which is also available on our website or Amazon.
Okay. And would you give the title of it, please?
The best way for a person, the title of it is Journey, a mother's account of love, loss, and spiritual healing. But if you just put Journey Montague-Bauer in Amazon, it will come up. And there's an audiobook, Kindle book, and a paperback.
Okay. And we'll put that information below this video.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Thank
people
you.
can more easily access it. I'm
Yes.
wondering, especially Mitzi, since you have really reflected a lot on the spiritual aspect of what was going on with your son, and also what was going on in your family, whether you have a sense that there are more people opening up to spiritual realms these days than, for instance, when you and I were quite a bit younger.
Yes. Yes.
And
Most definitely.
and how is it that you've come to that conclusion?
Well, I think I mentioned to you that I'm a doula, which means that I am a guardian at birth. I assist women in childbirth. Been to over 700 births in my career. I can tell you the baby's coming in. Like these newborns, well, I would just tell you every newborn comes in. The essence of humanity is love. I mean, when you hold hundreds of newborns, you get that like on a whole different level. Like we come in as purity, and whatever happens over time happens over time. But that spark within us, there is a spark within every human being that is pure love. And with some people who have maybe had less to burden that, maybe that spark is a little bit more expressed. Maybe I think parents now are less likely to dampen a child's spiritual inquisitiveness. And so they're allowed to. Journey was allowed to, like all these things that he, was allowed to explore. He 7-year-old, he had a conversation with his son's wife, and he told us about that. It was real to him, right? So I'm like, well, the it's time, I think, on the planet. That's why I think it's time. We've come to a place. We were all born for the times. And so these young people, they came in knowing, I think, what as souls, what a potential would be. And I see a lot of wakening up happening. People who just perceive things differently, right? Just and if this is what I find, if it's gradual, it's a little bit easier to navigate. If
Yeah.
it's sudden, then that's like what, and it's the ones who have this sudden experience that I think kind of get trapped in the conventional world of mental health, the psychiatric world or
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical world, because it's very uns unstable for a while.
Yeah. And
And so,
it does offer something quick, like take this pill and you won't be feeling
sure,
uncomfortable anymore within 24 hours or within 3 hours or something. So yes.
wow. You won't be feeling uncomfortable, but as Journey would tell me, he wasn't feeling anything.
Yeah.
Like zero thoughts,
Yeah.
zero feelings, zero,
Mm.
reading, couldn't comprehend anything. So there's a price to pay for that, but there is also, a time and place for it. But I think it was never meant to be a lifelong thing.
Yes.
And I kept looking like I just knew that Journey, if he were born in another time in another country, would be a shaman, or he would be the healer, or he just had that. Everybody I've ever met, and I've met a lot of people who are diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia, they're brilliant. They're brilliant beings. They're prescient. They're tuned into something the rest of us aren't. They're very sensitive. Usually, a lot of times they're musically inclined or poetically inclined. They're the masters of should be supporting with every fiber of our being and uplifting, not suppressing.
Yes.
These are the beings who came forth to offer a different perspective. And it's a shame that we, as a whole, we don't see it, or not yet, or not many of us, but some of us,
Some of us do, and some of us are
some of us.
saying, yes, we need to help those people who are trained as psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists of various kinds to expand their notion of what is
Yes.
being presented. So they might be able to help people like your dear son, Journey,
Yep.
who
Yep.
needed a different kind of care from the very beginning, most likely. So
Yeah.
yeah, Mitzi, I just want to thank you for going through this territory. It's hard for me to imagine being a mom who's been through this, and you're just so dedicated to helping others, um, that I know it gives you the courage and the
It
willingness
does.
to go through the story. But it just has to be a difficult story to go over in your mind. And I just want to thank you again from the depths of my own heart as a mom and a grandmom.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, thank
My
you.
pleasure. My pleasure. And this is for that very reason that um I just wish I'd have had the information I had in the beginning. You
Yes.
know, it's when a person first wakes up or first has their first psychotic experience or whatever we want to call it, the mania, whatever labels it's given, just that wide open experience, how that's handled changes everything.
Yes.
And so if I just wish I'd have known, had the information that I have now then. So that's the impetus for doing it. That's my inspiration for doing it, is hoping that, you know, other families can have a different outcome.
And if you were to, just as final words, if you were to give advice to people who are parents of children who are highly sensitive, who may be opening up in ways that other kids aren't opening up, what kind of advice would you give them?
Listen more than talk. Um, find Emma,
Oh, well, thank
find people, a spiritual leader if you have one who's conscious enough to navigate that. Maybe some of the older spiritual leaders. Um, listen, like, and then listen to your child and listen to the professionals with an open mind. because it's not, they would tell you that they have the answer and that really that's the only answer, but it isn't. Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, um, also pray. Pray
Right.
for your kids. Pray. Ask to be divinely inspired. Ask how to help them. Help me help them. Um, yeah.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, of course. It's a pleasure, Emma. Thank you for the service you're providing so many people.
You're very welcome personally, and thank you on behalf of others as well.
My
And
pleasure.
okay, and I look forward to more connecting with Integrative Mental Health University and Journey's Dream.
Yes.
And
Very, very good.
okay,
Take care, Emma.
until the next time.
All right. Peace.